Welcome back to if you haven't moved, and welcome if you've come from another room. I'm Nick Britton of the AIC, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Thuy Anh Nguyen of Vietnam Enterprise Investments to discuss what I think is possibly, arguably, the most exciting emerging market at the moment, especially given the news that it has just been upgraded to that status from frontier market status. I think earlier this week, is that right?
Yes, on the 7th of October, after New York closed, we were all awake here and in Vietnam. It was 3 a.m. Everybody is waiting for the good news. And good news did come that we get now included in the EM index of the FTSE Russell from September 2020.
So did you open the champagne?
Yes, yes.
I'm very pleased to hear that.
Any
I would have done the same.
I
would have done the same, absolutely. So, I mean, we'll talk a bit more about the implications of that later. But I think if we could start off, not everyone in this room will be familiar with this market. It is a very fast-growing country. It's aiming for 8.3% GDP growth and astoundingly, double-digit GDP growth in the next 5 years after that. So I think a kind of first question might be, what's going on here? Why is it growing so quickly? Is this really going to be sustainable?
Right, yes, thank you. You're quite right to start with GDP growth, because Vietnam is one of the rare spots in the world that offer very good growth. It has been good for the last couple of decades. We average about 6.5% for the last couple of decades. And now, this year, this growth is accelerating. For the first 3 quarters of this year, growth has been over 8%, 8.22 to be exact. And like you say, by the end of the year, the government is aiming for 8.5% growth. Now, your question is, where is that coming from? There are 3 major drivers for that. The first one is domestic consumption. Retail sales has risen almost 10%. And there's strong consumer demand driven by the wealth factor from real estate recovery as well as confidence in the economy. Also, inflation has been staying low, just above 3%, and that helped purchasing power as well. The second driver is government infrastructure spending. The government has £30 billion a year budget to spend on infrastructure. And there are roads and bridges being built everywhere. And that will improve logistics and lead to even better growth in the future. And if you are going to if you fly into Ho Chi Minh City now, you will go into an airport that is quite close to the city, and you quickly realize that it's quite over capacity. It's very crowded. Yeah. So from next year, if you fly into Vietnam, you'll be landing at Long Thanh Airport, which is a new airport. It's being built further out. It only started construction in 2021, and it's going to take its first flights at the end of this year. And from next year, it's going to be taking international flights.
And will there be fast connections into the city?
Yes, so that's being worked on as well. There's the metro system. Yeah. The metro system, I have to admit that it hasn't taken, it hasn't been as lightning speed as the airport, but finally it has been working since December last year, and that connection from the airport is being worked on now. So that's infrastructure, and so that is another driver of GDP growth. And lastly, of course, the FDI and export story is still in full swing. Right? So there was a lot of drama about the tariff at the beginning of this year with Trump. But despite all of that, export is up 30% so far this year. FDI is also at record high. It's not just registered FDI, but also disbursed FDI, which is important. So all of those things are contributing to this accelerating growth. And on top of all of that is government reforms that is expected to help turbocharge this growth. Yeah. And aiming towards the double-digit growth that you mentioned.
Well, should we talk about the reforms in a minute? Because you mentioned tariffs, so perhaps we can talk about the elephant in the room, because I guess you weren't cracking open the champagne when you heard that news. 46% tariffs that were later, fortunately, reduced to 20%.
Yeah.
But still, 20% tariffs, not good news.
Correct. But in both occasions, I still drink champagne because in victory, you deserve it. And in defeat, you need it, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, luckily, the tariff was reduced to 20% after intensive negotiation, and that was announced on the 2nd of July this year. Now, the impact of that and the tariff of goods imported into the US is not just on Vietnam, right? But they increased tariff on goods from all the countries that have trade surplus with the US, really. So the impact of that on the global economy in terms of deglobalization is yet to be seen. Yeah. But in the case of Vietnam, I can say that the drama was completely overblown, right? So even before this 20% tariff came into effect, goods from Vietnam into the US was already subject to some tariff, and that's average around 9.4%, according to WTO figure. Right. So this is only 10% increase in tariff. And then compared to other countries like India, China, we are still subject to a much lower tariff, right?
But how did companies react to that tariff? Did they have to squeeze their margins?
So I guess there will be a combination of both. But at the end of the day, it's the consumer that will be in the US that is going to take some of it, right?
Because the goods that are being imported into the US can't just be replaced necessarily.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
And I just say everyone's got tariffs, so...
Yeah. So there's a lot of talk about onshoring, but I don't think Americans are looking to be sewing Nike shoes or assembling.
I was going to ask, what kind of goods are we talking about in terms of US imports?
In terms of US imports, a big component is electronics.
Right.
So Samsung, for example, produce more than 60% of their handsets in Vietnam and export it globally. Apple also they make their AirPods and iPads in Vietnam. Yeah. So, but that brings me to an important point, which is that a lot of the export in Vietnam are being done by FDI enterprises.
So foreign direct investment.
Exactly, foreign direct investment enterprises. So, and those are not listed on the Vietnam stock exchange, right? So the impact of tariff on the economy, we've already said before that export is still up this year, even after the tariff came into effect. Because before August, you can say, okay, that's all front loading. People are trying to import into the US before. But now the figures for August and September are out with the new tariff, and it's still, export is still growing strong, right? So that's on the real economy. On the stock market, so one thing is Samsung, Apple, they may be affected by the tariff. Actually, Apple is probably exempt. But they're not listed on the Vietnamese stock exchange, so there's no effect there. In fact, all the companies listed on the Vietnam Stock Exchange have very little exposure to exports into the US. So only 1.5% of Vietnam Index corporate revenues is linked to exports into the US.
Right. And
sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt, because I think that's a really interesting point, and I think it might be a good point, because we've asked you to talk a lot about Vietnam in general. We haven't talked anything about the investment trust yet.
Right.
I think it's really important to point out, we have 3 investment trusts that invest in Vietnam. You are the largest. You are the best performing this year. Very pleased to say. And the other really important point, isn't it, is that you just invest in public companies in Vietnam. You're not doing any private equity investments in Vietnam. Yeah. And that's why you make the point about the limited impact of the tariffs because they're hitting more private companies rather than public companies. So it might be a good time to get you to talk a little bit about the investment trust itself and how you're accessing this amazing growth story you've been talking about.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Like you point out, Vietnam Enterprise Investment Limited, ticker VEIL, is the largest and longest established investment trust on the London Stock Exchange. It has also got a very stellar performance record. So if you go back to all the way back to 2000, when the stock market in Vietnam was established, returned an average of 11% per annum in sterling term to its shareholders. The 11% might not sound very exciting on a 1 year, 2 years, 3 years basis, but if you think you're compounding that over 25 years period, it's quite exciting to me. And so VEIL offers investors the opportunity to gain exposure to Vietnam, which is a very exciting, growing economy, as we have been discussing. So the exposure is quite broad-based. There are more than 40 stocks in the portfolio. Right. The most important sectors are banking, real estate, and consumer discretionary.
And is that because those are the most direct way to access that growth story? Yes,
absolutely. So our stock picks rely on the theme of domestic consumption and infrastructure development, which are the main driver of economic growth right now.
I mean, I'd like to take some questions. I'm sure we'll have questions. But just before that, you did mention the government's programme of reforms. So could you talk a bit more about that and what effect you think that will have?
Yes, the reforms have been fast and furious. So we have a new administration in place since August 2024. They announced that sweeping reforms are coming. They announced it at the end of 2024. And since the start of 2025, so we are only 3 quarters in now, but most of it has taken effect already. So the number of ministries have merged. They become from 18 to 15. Number of provinces go from 64 to 33.
64 to 33? That's a very radical change.
Yes. And the main thing there is to cut bureaucracy and increase efficiency. Yeah. So the government workforce has been cut by 20%, and most importantly, they are driving forward this idea that the private sector is now at the forefront of the economy.
It sounds like Trump would probably like to do some of those things.
Yes. So, when I was growing up, the only prestigious job to get is to work for the government. Right. Both my parents, one is a maths professor at the National University, one is a researcher at the National Institute of Social Sciences. Right. So, everybody aspired to work for the government. But now, everybody is into the private economy, and we all know that the private economy is what's going to drive this better growth.
Yeah. And how have things changed in terms of the education level of people? Has that been increasing, the percentage of university-educated people, that kind of thing?
Oh, yeah. Education has always been top priority for parents in Vietnam. So I think the mentality is very similar to in England. I mean, you would pay everything you have to put your children into the best possible school and get the best possible education. So and attainment actually on the up to secondary and high school level is very high in Vietnam compared to other ASEAN countries, like even compared to Singapore. By the university level, we are not at the top yet, but that is rapidly improving.
Okay. So can we talk a little bit, going back to the trust and I mentioned before there were 2 other Vietnamese trusts to choose from, but I think they're all quite different. I mean, could you talk a little bit more about the ways in which yours is different from the other 2, and also perhaps comment on because there's quite a lot of divergence in performance this year. You might think on the face of it, 3 investment trusts all investing in Vietnam would do quite similarly. You've done a lot better this year. Could you touch on the reasons for that?
Yes. So thank you for pointing it out that so far, by quite a wide margin, VAIL has been the best performing Vietnam-focused investment trust on the LSE. The reason for that is that, so we, like you also mentioned earlier, we only invest in publicly listed equity, and that means higher confidence with valuation, higher visibility, transparency for investors. Well, and most importantly, the reason for outperformance is that our portfolio managers have been picking the right stocks and staying the course. Because after Liberation Day, when President Trump announced 46% tariff, even though, like we talked about earlier, there's no direct, I mean, there shouldn't be any direct impact on the equity market, but the market sold off for 3 days straight. It's down to by 20%. But we used the opportunity to pick up good value stocks that we have been watching and now can get it. So then after that, and after the announcement of the final tariff, market normalized and we were able to accelerate with our performance.
Okay, excellent. And I suppose being purely publicly listed in terms of your portfolio, you're going to respond quite quickly to changes in sentiment.
Yes, exactly. And also the other advantage that we have is that with VAIL's size, its longevity, and its contact in the local business community, we always have very good access to new deals in the market, especially IPO. And that is important because now the IPO market in Vietnam is heating up. There has already been 2 high-profile IPOs since the start of this year, one of a security company and one of a land company. And there's a pipeline of worth about 40 billion of IPO in the next $40 billion US worth in the next couple of years.
Right.
So usually in period of many IPOs, VAIL always managed to deliver strong alpha.
I see. Could I just ask the audience a question? How many of you, could you raise your hand, how many are shareholders in VAIL? Quite a lot.
Thank you very much.
Maybe about half of you. And the reason I ask that is I want to kind of think from the point of view of those who aren't maybe shareholders in VAIL yet. Why would you buy an investment trust that just invests in one country when you could buy an Asian investment trust or an emerging market investment trust? Why just a Vietnam trust?
That is such a good question. And we... Sorry, are you asking the audience or?
No, well, I don't think we'll go to the audience yet, but we're going to come to them in a minute. But yes.
No, that's a good question. That we get that sometimes. In fact, I was chatting to a gentleman earlier, and he said, "I don't do single country stock."
Yeah.
Single country fund. But my answer is this: if you allocate, let's say, 10% of your portfolio to emerging market because you think, okay, good growth, they are emerging, so 10%. But an emerging market would only have around 0.3, so 30 basis point in Vietnam. So 10% of your portfolio and 30 basis points, so you end up having 3 basis points in Vietnam. Now, that might be enough. But if you're convinced by the growth story of Vietnam and think that there is a lot more to come, then you probably want more than 3 basis points, right? And here with VAIL being listed on the London Stock Exchange, you know that all the very stringent requirement of the LSE are met. So it's if you want to invest in Vietnam, then VAIL is kind of a blue chip offering. So in that respect, if you think that the story is worth a better weighting than just put in an EM fund, then it's good to to invest direct.
And presumably you have a big team on the ground in Vietnam, which not every emerging market fund has.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good point. Because emerging markets funds are managed by a team that maybe is in London or somewhere, and they're investing in India, in Vietnam, in Mexico. Emerging markets are all different, and you can't be experts in all of them, right? Whereas with Vail, we have portfolio managers and research analysts on the ground, living and breathing the company and the services that they invest in. So in terms of the understanding as well as access and connection, you can't beat that.
Yeah. Okay. Look, I've been quite remiss because, and I know we've got some questions. I am coming to them, I promise. But quite remiss because I said I would ask you about the exciting promotion of Vietnam from frontier to emerging markets, and we haven't really touched on it. So the obvious question, what's the impact of that? How big is the impact of that going to be on your trust and the Vietnamese stock market?
Yes, so while market has been celebrating, it's up, I think about over 1% yesterday and almost 2% today.
Yeah. I guess the decision was expected, was it? Which is why it's not up even more than that.
Yes, there was high expectation that we would achieve that. But, market is up 36% year to date. So,
and presumably some of that is because people were expecting this to happen, so some of it's already...
Yes. Some of it, and also because of earnings growth and the fundamentals in the economy as well, and that's all driving up market despite foreign selling, right? But you ask about the impact. So inflows, FTSE itself estimate that there would be 1 to 1.5 billion $1.5 billion US dollar of foreign inflow into the market. That's only passive, but for the active funds, it could be around 7 billion US dollars. But the main thing is FTSE inclusion is not our end destination. The government, the authority like the SSC, the State Securities Commission, they've already, in the last couple of weeks, issued this new plan to work towards MSCI EM inclusion already, and they've got concrete, specific steps that we need to take to get there. Okay. And that is a bigger prize because when we get included in there, the ambition is to get it by 2030, then it could be tens of billions of dollars that need to go into the flow into the Vietnam stock market.
Okay, excellent. All right, let's take some questions. We've got a question there in the back. Or maybe at the front. Thank you.
Actually, I can't actually see you, so I don't know if you could stand up.
Yes, sorry.
Could you mention some of the Vietnamese companies that are actually helping fuel your growth in some of the sectors? Leaving aside the Samsungs and the Apple, it's more the Vietnamese companies themselves that are showing exciting growth. Yes,
exactly. So thank you for that question. So in our portfolio, the biggest three sectors are banking, real estate, and consumer discretionary. And the stock that we are most excited about at the moment is a company called Mobile World, so MWG. They started off as a retailer of consumer electronics. Over time, they have built up a dominant position. Their stores are everywhere, and they dominate that sector. In the past few years, they have spent that retailing expertise and expand into grocery retailing, so a chain called Bách Hóa Xanh. And that Bách Hóa Xanh is finally broke even last year, and now profit growth is accelerating. So for MWG, the stock has returned over 30% this year, but with our target price, we are still targeted to go up for another 25% or so this year. And also they are looking to possibly spin off Bách Hóa Xanh, the grocery retailing that I mentioned. So that would be another catalyst for their share price performance. Bách Hóa Xanh is a great proposition because it's a modern grocery retailing experience. So, people still buy a lot of groceries in the wet markets every day, right? But there's a big trend to, as the middle class expand and get wealthier and are busy all day with their jobs, they can't go to the market every day anymore. So there's a big trend to shift from the mom and pop store to a modern, more convenient store. And Baikwasang is at the forefront of that and capturing all of that shift in consumer behavior. So that's why we like this stock.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Any more questions? There's one here on the front row. Thanks, Lisa.
Yes, one of the big positives is your demographics.
Yes.
And you have this very young, growing population. Also, could you remind us, because you're viewed as a mini China, how many people are working on the land in the paddy fields, et cetera, and how many are coming back to the cities? Is that a huge positive for new labour?
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a really good question, and that's the most important point, really, of what is driving Vietnam economy. It's that big population, 100 million people. The average age is only 32, and all very, they are young, they are hungry, they're motivated, they're very hardworking. So, and the fertility rate is still, it's 2.01, so it doesn't reach the 2.1 yet, but still, at 2, it's 1 million people adding to the economy every year. And it's one of the best growth in population growth rate in the world. And that is a structural driver that will continue driving our growth, especially now that we have government reforms, and government is very determined to increase people's standard of living. And you make the point about how many people in the fields and how many people in the city. Vietnam urbanization is at the moment at 40%. So that, I guess, roughly means that 40% of people live in cities and towns. But that is growing fast at around 2% per annum. So one of the highest growth of urbanization in the world. And that means more demands for infrastructure, more demands for real estate. That's why real estate is our second biggest sector in our portfolio. And that means that everything is centered around this middle class expansion and getting wealthier. Mm-hmm. Did I miss something? Yeah.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Excellent. Do we have any more questions? We've got one question right over here. Thank you.
Yeah, the current discount is about 17% to net asset value. Given that it's all publicly quoted companies, so it's very easy for your NAV to be verified, if you like. It seems quite a high discount.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's all it's all publicly traded large cap and mid cap companies, right? So why do we have a discount? I guess it's to do with the supply and demand of the shares. But we are very lucky in that we have a board that is laser focused on controlling and narrowing the discount. So discount at the end of 2024 was over 20%. So it was 20 point something, maybe around 21%. So now it has narrowed to 17, 16%. That's already, that's a good improvement. But our board has been continually buying. So far this year, they have bought back 160 million US dollars worth of shares. That's about 10% of the outstanding shares. And they have stated in the interim report that they aim to bring the discount to 10% or under. So we should continue, hopefully, see improvement there in terms of the discount. But I agree with you, it shouldn't be like this. It should be in the low single digit.
So you've got a discount opportunity, you've got growth opportunity. What more are you looking for? Thuy Anh, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nick.